"Excuse me, sir, may I have your leftovers?" The millionaire looked up, ready to dismiss her, until his eyes met hers. In that single moment, time stopped. What he saw was not hunger, but something far deeper, something that would change his life forever. The restaurant glowed with golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung, like frozen rain, above polished tables. Laughter floated through the air, soft and elegant. Michael Carter sat by the window, his tailored suit blending perfectly with the luxury around him. He was a man who had everything: money, fame, and silence. The kind of silence that comes when no one dares to speak truth to you. Outside, rain tapped gently against the glass. A faint reflection caught his eye, someone standing near the door. A young woman, her coat damp, her hair clinging to her face. She looked uncertain, almost invisible among the rich crowd. The waiter approached her, whispering something. She hesitated, clutching her old bag. Her eyes flicked toward Michael's table. She took a breath, then stepped forward. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" she asked softly. The room fell silent. Every fork paused midair. Every conversation faded into a single echo of her words. Michael looked up slowly. Her voice was not weak. It was trembling, yes, but not from fear. It carried something else. Dignity. Hope. His eyes met hers. They were not begging eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had known hunger, but refused to surrender her pride. For a moment, Michael forgot the taste of the steak before him. He forgot the meeting waiting on his phone. He saw only her eyes, clear, brown, unbroken. The waiter moved closer, embarrassed. "Sir, I can ask her to leave." Michael raised his hand. "Wait." The woman stood still, her hands trembling slightly. Water dripped from her coat onto the marble floor. A quiet rhythm. One drop, then another. Michael felt something stir in his chest. A memory long buried. Cold nights. Empty plates. The face of his mother whispering, "We will make it through." He had spent years burying that boy who once searched through trash bins for food. But now, that boy was standing in front of him again. Only this time, she wore a torn coat and carried quiet courage. He pushed his plate toward her, but she shook her head. "I do not want your food, sir. I want your chance." The words hit him like thunder. A chance. Not mercy. Not pity. A door. Michael leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. The room seemed smaller now. The chandeliers dimmer. The air thicker with questions. He looked at her again, really looked. And in that single, silent moment, something impossible began to happen inside him. He felt it first in his chest, a quiet breaking, like ice cracking beneath sunlight. Something that had been frozen for years began to melt. Michael Carter, the man known for his control, his composure, his unshakable calm, felt the world shift inside him. Her words echoed again. "I do not want your food, sir. I want your chance." He leaned forward, his voice low. "What do you mean by chance?" The woman blinked, her lashes heavy with rain. "I applied for a job at your company," she said softly. Her voice trembled, but her gaze did not. "They said I was not qualified. I only wanted to explain myself, but the guards sent me away." Michael's hand tightened around his glass. "Which department?" "Housekeeping," she said. Then, quieter, "I just needed work, not sympathy." Every word struck something raw in him. The other diners pretended not to watch, but every head was slightly turned. Every whisper carried her name they did not know. Michael nodded once. "Sit," he said. Her lips parted in surprise. "I cannot," she whispered. "I am wet. I will ruin the seat." "Sit," he repeated, this time softer, not as a command, as an invitation. She slowly lowered herself into the chair across from him. The waiter hesitated, unsure, but Michael gave a small nod. "Bring her something warm," he said. "Soup, bread, tea." When the waiter left, the silence returned. The woman's hands rested in her lap, fingers clasped tightly. Her clothes were worn, the seams faded, but she sat straight, proud. "What is your name?" Michael asked. "Lena," she said. Her voice was steady now. He repeated it once, quietly. "Lena." It felt heavy in his mouth, like a name he had known long ago. The waiter returned with the tray. Steam rose from the bowl of soup, curling into the air like a ghost. Lena whispered a thank you, her fingers brushing the edge of the cup. For a moment, she just held it close, feeling its warmth. Then she looked up. "Do you often eat alone, sir?" He almost smiled. "Yes, I suppose I do." "Why?" The question startled him. Few people ever dare to ask Michael Carter why anything. Most only asked how much. He glanced at the city lights outside. Rain traced silver lines down the window. "I work too much," he said at last. "It leaves little time for people." She nodded slowly. "Work can feed you," she said, "but it cannot keep you warm." Her words hung between them, soft and simple, but true in a way that stung. Michael looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt small. Not powerful, not rich, just human. He studied her face, tired but alive, eyes that still searched for light, hands that carried both hunger and hope. "You said you wanted a chance," he said quietly. "What would you do if I gave it?" Lena's answer came without hesitation. "I would not waste it." He leaned back, fingers brushing the edge of his cufflink. He could hear his own pulse now. It sounded louder than the music, louder than the rain. There was something strange about her calmness. It was not rehearsed. It was not polite. It was born from survival. When she spoke again, her voice was even gentler. "Do you remember what it is like to be hungry, sir?" His breath caught. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. The truth was sharp. He did remember. He remembered being 12, sitting outside a bakery window, watching the baker throw out unsold bread. He remembered waiting until everyone left, then running forward, grabbing what he could before the dogs came. He remembered his mother's eyes when he brought it home. Tears, pride, relief. He had buried that memory under layers of success. But now, her question dug it up again. "Yes," he said finally. "I remember." Lena nodded. "Then you understand why I asked." She smiled faintly, not out of victory, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when you are finally seen. Michael looked down at the untouched plate before him. It seemed meaningless now. The steak, the wine, the golden light, all of it felt like decoration hiding something hollow. He signaled the waiter. "Pack everything," he said, "and send it to the kitchen staff. They deserve it more than I do tonight." The waiter blinked in surprise, but obeyed. Lena watched quietly, her eyes soft. When the table was cleared, Michael turned back to her. "Lena," he said, "I want you to come to my office tomorrow. Ask for me directly." Her brows lifted. "Will they let me in?" "They will," he said firmly. "I will make sure of it." She hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Michael paused. He searched for an answer that made sense. None did. "Because," he said slowly, "you reminded me of something I lost." Her expression softened. "What did you lose?" "Myself," he admitted. The words felt heavier than he expected. He had spent years building walls of money, success, and reputation. But now, one sentence from a stranger had begun to tear them down. Lena looked at him for a long moment, as if studying the truth behind his eyes. Then she smiled again, small, warm, real. "Maybe tonight you found him again." Michael felt something tighten in his throat. He could not remember the last time anyone spoke to him without fear or expectation. It felt like grace. Outside, the rain softened. The city lights blurred into halos of gold and blue. Time seemed to slow. Lena stood. "Thank you for listening, sir." He rose as well. "Thank you for asking," he replied. As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Lena." She looked back. He took off his coat and placed it over her shoulders. It was far too large for her, but it carried warmth. She touched the fabric lightly, her eyes shimmering under the dim light. "Do not lose yourself again," she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. And then she was gone, out into the soft rain, her figure fading into the silver night. Michael stood there for a long time, staring at the door. The table felt emptier without her, yet somehow he felt fuller inside. The sound of the rain grew fainter. Somewhere deep inside him, a new sound began to rise. Not noise, not music, something like hope. He turned toward the window again. The reflection that looked back at him was no longer the cold, polished man the world knew. It was someone else, someone who had finally remembered what it meant to be alive. That night, Michael Carter wrote a new company policy himself. No application would ever be rejected without review. Every rejected candidate would receive a personal call, and those in need would be offered training, paid, not unpaid. It was not charity. It was fairness, the kind he once needed. And every morning after that, when he arrived at his office, he passed a small desk near the reception. There sat Lena, her hair tied neatly, her hands busy, her smile unshaken. She never mentioned that night again. She did not need to. It lived in both of them, a quiet miracle born not from money, but from kindness rediscovered. And sometimes when Michael looked out at the rain from his office window, he saw her reflection beside his own, and he realized that miracles do not arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes they come softly, with a whisper that says, "May I have your leftovers, sir?" Michael stood by the window of his corner office the next morning, the same city stretching beneath him like a moving sea of glass and light. The clouds had cleared, but the rain had left behind a soft mist that clung to the skyline. For the first time in years, he noticed how the sunlight reflected off the wet streets. It shimmered like hope. His assistant, Claire, entered with her usual crisp tone. "Your 9 a.m. board meeting is in 10 minutes, sir." Also, a woman named Lena arrived early. "She's waiting in the lobby." Michael turned slowly. He could still hear her voice from the night before. Quiet, steady, impossible to ignore. "Send her in," he said. Claire blinked, uncertain. She's dressed very simply, sir. I can show her to the staff area if you." "Send her in," he repeated, his tone gentle but firm. A few minutes later, Lena stepped into the office. The morning light touched her hair, drying the faint dampness that remained from the rain. She wore a clean white blouse and a modest skirt that had clearly been ironed with care. Her shoes were old but polished. Michael gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." She smiled slightly, nervous but composed. "This office," she whispered, glancing around, "it feels like another world." "In many ways, it is," he replied. "But worlds can change." There was a pause. Outside, the city hummed with the rhythm of another busy day. Horns, footsteps, the faint sound of construction echoing across the avenue. Michael leaned forward. "You said something last night," he began, "about not wanting food, but a chance." Lena nodded. "I remember. I want to give you that," he said simply. "But I need to understand who you are. Tell me your story." She hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of her skirt. Then she drew a deep breath. "I came to this city 3 years ago," she said softly. "My mother passed away. I had no family left, so I took the little money I saved and came here, hoping to find work." Her voice carried no bitterness, only quiet truth. "I cleaned rooms in small hotels, served tea in roadside cafes. Sometimes I slept behind the buildings I worked in because rent was too high." Michael felt his throat tighten again. "Why housekeeping?" "Because it's honest work," she said. "I like to make things clean, to bring order, even if the world outside is messy." He studied her face as she spoke. There was no self-pity, only pride, simple, unpolished, real. "When I heard your company was hiring," she continued, "I thought maybe it was time to try for something better. But when I reached the gate, they said my application was not accepted." She smiled faintly. "So I waited outside, thinking maybe if I just explained myself, someone would listen." Michael looked down at the polished surface of his desk. In its reflection, he saw his own face, calm, expensive, distant. And behind that, the faint outline of the boy he once was. "You waited in the rain," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "because sometimes rain feels kinder than people." The words landed deep, echoing longer than they should have. Michael stood and walked to the window again, hands in his pockets. "You are right," he said after a moment. "Sometimes success makes people forget what it felt like to wait." Lena tilted her head. "You remember now?" He turned to her. "Yes, because of you." She did not speak, but her eyes softened, and something unspoken passed between them, a mutual understanding that needed no decoration. He returned to his desk and opened a folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He wrote something quickly, signed it, and handed it to her. She looked at it and froze. Her eyes widened. "This is a job offer," he said. "Full-time housekeeping. Salary benefits, training. Starting today, if you accept. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the paper. She looked up, disbelief flickering across her face. I do not know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Yes, she whispered. Thank you. He smiled faintly. Do not thank me. Just prove me right. She nodded. I will. As she stood to leave, she paused by the door. Sir, she said, when I came here last night, I thought the world was full of closed doors. You open one. I will not waste it. After she left, Michael sat in silence. The scent of rain still lingered on her coat, the one he had given her. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange lightness in his chest, something that felt almost like forgiveness. Later that day, during the board meeting, his executives presented quarterly reports, numbers, projections, profits. It all felt different now. He listened, but his mind kept drifting to the simple truth of the night before. That one act of kindness could ripple farther than any investment. When the meeting ended, one of his directors approached him. Sir, I noticed the new employee policy you signed this morning, the man said cautiously. Free training, guaranteed interviews. Are you certain? It might cost us. Michael's expression remained calm. It will not cost us, he replied. It will teach us. By evening, the company buzzed with quiet surprise. Managers whispered about the sudden changes. Some questioned his motives. Others smiled, secretly proud to work under a man who remembered what humanity looked like. That night, Michael stayed late in his office. Outside, the city glowed again, streetlights flickering on one by one like small stars. The building across from him reflected his own, a mirror made of steel and light. He picked up the phone and called a reception desk. Is Lena still there? He asked. Yes, sir, the voice replied. She's finishing up cleaning the conference hall. Tell her to come upstairs before she leaves. A few minutes later, Lena appeared again, still in her uniform, her hair tied back neatly. Her face was tired but content. You wanted to see me, sir? Michael smiled. Yes. I wanted to ask, how was your first day? She laughed softly. I polished the floors of a room bigger than the house I grew up in. But it felt good. Honest work always does. He nodded. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I do now, she said. The company dormitory. One of the other women offered to share her room until I save enough. He hesitated for a moment. Then, almost shyly, he said, I was thinking of creating a program. Housing for employees who need it. Affordable, near the office. Maybe even scholarships for their families. Lena looked at him in awe. That would change lives. He smiled. That is the point. They stood in silence for a moment. The sound of the cleaning machines downstairs filled the air, gentle and distant. Finally, she said, Sir, may I ask something? Of course. When you helped me last night, what made you decide to listen? He thought about it, eyes drifting toward the city again. Because someone once helped me when I asked for leftovers too. She stared at him, surprised. I did not know. Most people do not, he said. I was 16, hungry, lost. A cafe owner gave me his leftover soup and a job washing dishes. I promised myself I would never forget that kindness. But somewhere along the way, I did. You reminded me. Her eyes glistened again. Maybe that was the miracle, she whispered. Michael smiled quietly. Maybe it was. Outside, thunder rumbled far away, gentle and low. The rain had started again, but this time it felt different, softer, almost like a blessing. Lena excused herself, bowing slightly before leaving the office. Michael watched her go, then turned back to the window. The night comes full circle. The evening was calm, painted in soft shades of orange and gold as the sun sank behind the city skyline. Michael Carter stood once again by the tall window of his office, the same window where months ago he had watched the rain and seen a reflection of himself he barely recognized. Tonight, the glass reflected something different. Peace. Down below, the courtyard of Carter Enterprises was alive with quiet laughter and music. Hundreds of employees, from executives to cleaners, gathered for the company's first gratitude night. It was Lena's idea, a celebration not of profit, but of people. Michael adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and walked down to the hall. The moment he stepped in, the applause started. But it was not the loud, empty kind he heard at business awards or charity galas. This one was real, warm, collective, grateful. Lena stood near the stage, dressed elegantly but simply, holding a small microphone. When she saw him, her eyes lit up. "Everyone," she said, smiling, "please welcome the man who believed in second chances." He joined her under the soft lights. For a moment, they stood side by side, the entire hall silent. Michael spoke slowly, his voice steady and heartfelt. "Some time ago," he said, "a young woman walked up to my table and asked me for my leftovers. But that night, she gave me something far greater than food. She gave me the courage to see again, to remember that wealth without compassion is emptiness." The crowd listened in stillness, the words hanging like gentle rain. He turned toward Lena. "She reminded me that change does not begin in boardrooms or on paper. It begins with seeing another human being, truly seeing them. And tonight, as I look at all of you, I see a family." Applause filled the room again, soft, emotional, rising like a wave. Lena stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "I once asked for leftovers because I had nothing, but what I received was a chance. And that chance became a promise, one I now carry forward, to help others find their place, their dignity, their light." She looked out at the audience, the janitors, the secretaries, the trainees, the guards, and her eyes glistened. This company is not built by walls or windows. It is built by hearts that care. Tears shimmered quietly across faces in the crowd. Michael placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Well said," he whispered. The music began again, soft piano notes floating through the air. People began to mingle, to laugh, to dance. Michael and Lena stood aside, watching. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think success was measured by what I could build. Now I think it's measured by who I can lift." Lena smiled. "Then you have built something far greater than a company." He looked around the hall, the people, the warmth, the light, and he realized she was right. This was not just success. It was redemption. Outside, the night sky was clear. The stars looked brighter than usual, reflected in the glass walls of the building. Lena turned toward him. "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day," he said with a smile. "It reminds me that miracles do not shout. They whisper." The crowd called for a final toast. Michael raised his glass. "To kindness," he said, "to the courage to ask, and to the grace to answer." Glasses clinked. Laughter spread. And as the lights glowed warmer, Michael looked once more toward the door, the very place where it all began. The memory replayed in his mind. A rain-soaked woman, a simple question, and a spark of compassion that changed two lives forever. He closed his eyes for a brief second and whispered, not to anyone in particular, "Thank you, Lena." Lena turned toward him, hearing the faint words, "Thank you, sir." Outside, the first drops of gentle rain began to fall again. But this time, they did not speak of sorrow. They spoke of renewal, of stories that end only to begin again in someone else's act of kindness. And as the music played and the rain brushed softly against the windows of Carter Enterprises, the world outside kept moving, quietly, beautifully, because somewhere kindness had found its way home. The end.